So, yeah, a warm welcome to all India Smart Protein Innovation Challenge 2021 participants. This is our Inspiration webinar series and the third webinar of the Inspiration webinar series, which will be focusing mainly on cell line and cell culture optimization. So before I move into introductions for our speakers today. A few rules of engagement. So you as a participant can use the Q&A button for questions for the speaker, but also feel free to use the chat section. Again, like if most of you had participated in yesterday's webinar, like Shadul said, please do not hesitate to ask any kind of question, how small or how complicated it might be. There is nothing like a wrong question, so please feel free to drop in your questions in the Q&A session box. And and also at the end of the webinar, you could just raise your hand and we can allow you to ask a question live after the two speakers present their slides. And also a final reminder, as for the email today, most of you might have seen, this is the last chance to register your teams for the Smart Protein Innovation Challenge by the end of the day today, 11:59 p.m. So please do so if you have not done already, and if you have done already, that's great. So moving into introductions, I'd like to, so firstly, I'm Dr. Akshay Bhatt, the Science and Technology Specialist, focused on cultivated meat as well as fermentation with GFI India. And today we have two speakers, experts in their respective fields of cell culture as well as cell culture optimization. Dr. N. Madhusudana Rao, who is the CEO of the Atal Incubation Center, Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology at Hyderabad. So most of you might have already seen or heard Madhusudana Rao speak about cultivated meat specifically in several talks which GFI have specifically hosted previously. So he has a PhD in biochemistry from the National Institute of Nutrition India. His extensive career spans gene delivery and protein engineering, and he has got 12 US patents in his career. At CCMB, he has coordinated several multi-institution projects with several international institutes as well as corporate institutions. So we'll be talking mainly towards the cultivated meat aspect of cell culture and optimization in terms of land animals, the ones which are used for cellular agriculture, animal agriculture. And the second speaker we have today is Dr. Mukunda Goswami. He's a principal scientist fish at the Department of Fish Genetics and Biotechnology, Central Institute of Fisheries Education, India, and also has been very recently a GFI grantee. So Dr. Goswami has more than 20 years of experience in fisheries stem cell research, fish proteomics, and molecular phylogenetics, specializing in developing and characterizing fish cell lines. So he's currently involved in developing muscle cell lines for several indigenous varieties of fishes, such as Labia rohita, starting with zebrafish as a model organism. So Dr. Goswami has been awarded, like I said before, the GFI's annual competitive research grant program of nearly 70 lakhs to develop cultivated seafood cell lines from indigenous fish species. And to everyone in the audience, this grant is extremely competitive, and this is the first time an Indian researcher has been awarded a grant from GFI. So firstly, Dr. Madhusudan Rao will be speaking for 30 minutes, followed by Dr. Mukunda Goswami, who will be specifically talking about cultivated seafood. So Dr. Madhusudan Rao, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you, Akshay, for the introduction. And so the initiative on the smart proteins, I'm sure it's a great initiative. It's been around for almost 3 years now, and it's really collecting a lot of activity and a lot of momentum towards whatever it started to begin with, to look for alternates of protein source other than animal meat. So the way I'm looking at today's presentation is to, I'm assuming that there are a variety of participants in the audience in science kind of backgrounds, right, from biologists to engineers to chemists to polymer chemists, etc. So I wanted to put it more as problems that are ready to go in clean meat. There are several things that need to be tweaked because if you look at clean meat is the reason why I'm interested in clean meat is because it brings together a number of experts to solve the problem. And one of the things I just want to say here is some of the things I won't be speaking about today, which is a kind of a given, are what is the essentiality of clean meat? What is the consumer preferences? What are the climate imperatives? And the quality contribution of the cultivated meat or cultured meat. So these are all something that we already have a very strong case for to go for, clean meat approaches. So we won't be looking at that. So what I'm looking at in this presentation is look at these 4 or 5 major aspects that are critical for realizing the technology of clean meat. Let it be cell lines or the media or the scaffolds or the bioprocess aspects or the quality aspects and things like that. These are all, each one has at least half a dozen problems that need to be addressed and can be solved in isolation. And in fact, one should be looking at not alone of producing meat per se, but what is it that they can solve when you look at the process of clean meat production. There are several aspects that need contributions, innovations, and things like that. So my presentation would be looking at the whole thing and then look at some of the problems that we can define in a bit of a detail so that it's attractive and falls into probably one of your expertise to look at. So if you look at the cell choices, for example, there are embryonic cell types. That is one cell type. I mean, in the clean meat itself, the issue is, do you begin with some kind of a stem cell of one kind or the other, right? So because they proliferate very well, but what is your particular choice of which stem cell? Because there are several of them. So if you look at, people have attempted each one of them for their own merit. If you look at the first one, the embryonic stem cells, they're the best in terms of their potency, in terms of their ability to go to different germlines by appropriate, conditioning of the cell type, media conditions. They're the excellent ones. But the problem here is, though theoretically demonstrated, for many of the animal species that we are interested in the clean meat, the embryonic stem cell extraction, establishment of the culture cell lines, they're not yet being solved. They are theoretically solved probably in one animal a couple of years ago, but the point here is we need to do that. So usage of the embryonic stem cells for meat production or proliferation and differentiation kind of purposes, we may have to wait for a little longer. So, but there is also a chance for those people who work in stem cell area, look at whether a particular species, they can resolve the problem, it'll be great. So the next level, the next kind of stem cells that we look at is induced pluripotent stem cells, where one can make things happen by reprogramming the cell lines. But at the same time, there are a lot of issues still need to be solved in terms of the quality parameters. And in fact, many of these things, one should remember, there should be a kind of consensus on what became what. Today, for many other eventual cell types, the recommendations are not yet completely developed. So there is a need for strategies for reprogramming the iPSCs to a particular endpoint and also characterizing them in a way that it is acceptable to everybody. The next ones are mesenchymal stem cells. Or here again, the issue is marker profiling. It has become an issue because when you do something, are you getting the kind of cell type that you are looking for? How do you profile it? So there has to be a consensus on marker profiling when you're looking at mesenchymal stem cells as a source material for clean meat. The next ones are fibroadipogenic progenitor cells, which are not actually become muscle cells, but their presence will, they produce a lot of growth factors and things like that, which would help the muscle cells to grow and differentiate. So we looked at so far the embryonic stem cells, iPSCs, MSCs, fibroadipogenic progenitor cells. But the last thing that we are also interested and do work a lot on is myosatellite cells. I mean, these are all quite abundant in any muscle tissue. And we, in CCMB, when we took up this project, we looked at sheep as an animal for which we will develop the clean meat technologies. So we took the sheep and then isolated by biopsy without sacrificing the animal, a little bit of muscle tissue, and use the muscle tissue to, make sure that it is, microbe free and all that. And then isolated the myosatellites, the satellite cells in the muscle tissue, because they're quite abundant. But at the same time, one has to be very careful in the marker profiling. You have to have all, I won't get into the details, but you have to have all the half a dozen different markers to establish that what we are dealing with is the myosatellite cells. So now once we have them in our place, for example, we must have gone at least for 15 generations. And each time we monitor the profiling of these various markers, using various markers to make sure that, things are not going wayward whenever you grow them. So it brings us to the next point of cell banking also, is when cells are supposed to divide and grow for a number of generations, the chances of many genetic changes happening during this proliferation is very obvious. We see it a lot. So, like, whether it is deletions, transpositions, single nucleotide polymorphisms, whatever you call, and the cells after 30, 40 generations is not going to be the same thing as what it began with, right? So there has to be a very strict quality control, because this kind of drift from its original genotype is going to be an issue when you go to when you go for regulatory approvals and things like that. So cell banking also becomes an important need in quality assessment of the cells that are coming up, and also providing these cell lines developed by different groups, put them together so they can be available for further distribution, whether on payment or non-payment, or some kind of a voluntary agencies that take care of this kind of cell banking. So cell banking becomes a crucial place of providing the required quality assessment of the cell lines that are submitted, so that there is a consensus on what is expected and what needs to be done further. Because one of the things that people often complain about is the microbial contamination in the whenever you isolate these satellite cells and things like that, stem cells, like mycoplasma contaminations and other bacterial contaminations. How do you assure that there is nothing? And then how do you assure that these things are not actually affecting the outcomes of the clean meat processes? So for all these, there should be a cell banking becomes an important agency to oversee the quality of the things. And also, as you know, this is a developing technology, a bit more policing on or setting up the guidelines and criteria for what is good and what is not good is very important, and can be the role of cell banking, which can be an important activity in cultivated meat. So the next thing that comes to everybody's mind more, because one is a purely cell biology challenge that we talked about. How do you isolate these cells? How do you promote the proliferation and differentiation? number of generations and things like that. And people talk about there is a natural cutoff limit for cell proliferation, the number of divisions a cell can go through. 30 generations, depend on the cell types. So how do you overcome this? Unless we overcome this, the density of the cells won't be enough to make the whole process economical. One has to look at all these problems. Like one of the things that people talk about, which I'll talk briefly later on, is the telomere shortening during each division. So people talk about supplementing telomerases, which extend the telomeres, or come up with some kind of a, interfering agents that can prevent such a thing to happen. Or once you have a cell culture that is growing very well, because as I said, mutations are natural consequences of whenever some division takes place, should you be screening the cell lines which can overcome the kind of Hayflick limit naturally without interfering. So because all these are possible, and there are cases shown in the literature by careful studies and screening, people have shown certain cell lines could overcome the Hayflick limit, that is the telomere shortening limit, and become a very, their proliferation numbers can go to 50, 60. So that is another way. Why should we be looking at that as a feasible approach is another one. Or use small molecules to overcome these kind of challenges. Because one of the things all of us should remember is how acceptable, obviously it is going to be a challenge. How acceptable is it to do a kind of genetic manipulation of the cell line so that we can achieve some of the things that we want? When we say genetic manipulation, are we talking about some kind of a GM kind of a thing, or some virus-induced alterations in the structure in the genome, so that some of the advantages we are seeking are we are able to design them into our cell lines? So the question comes to is how acceptable is a GM or a virus-mediated genetically modified cell lines for clean meat purposes? It's going to be a challenge. I'm sure there are alternates to it. So we should stay away from genetically modifications of one kind or the other, because in modern biology, there are so many opportunities, whether you call it CRISPRs or you call it many things that, that one can do in manipulating the genome so that you get what you want. So that is something that is debatable and should be discussed. And when we come to media becomes one of the very critical parameter in terms of economics in the cell culture in clean meat processes. The reason for it being, when you look at, today, probably in when the first clean meat product was demonstrated some 7-8 years ago, it costed almost $0.3 million to get a few patties. But of course, these numbers were calculated based on that day's cost of various media. But now we know that numbers have come down tremendously, almost 1/100th or something like that today. The reason for it is we are able to overcome some of the challenges the media, because media is the kind of cost. The cost of media is very high in the production of clean meat. So when you look at broadly media, you have carbon sources, amino acids, buffers, hormones, growth factors, etc. But if you look at the cost and cost contribution of each of these components to the media, growth factors come the highest, because they probably, if you want to come up with a media without using the serum is a no-go, more because serum comes from animals and we are looking at the alternative to animals. So serum is not done. So we will have to come up with what the serum offers. Serum is a very complex composition, but out of it, all of them may not be required. So there are growth factors that are essential. People have realized if you are able to come up with half a dozen growth factors very appropriately, along with hormones, you would be able to overcome the need for serum, which also indicates that we can probably cut down the cost tremendously. So the serum challenges are there are many ways to overcome the serum challenge. In fact, many people today overcome this by, tuning their cell line to a particular liquid media composition without using any serum. This can happen, and it has been a lot of people do it. That's not a problem. But one of the things that we are attempting to do here is, we have isolated the genome of sheep, genome DNA of sheep, and cloned all the growth factors that are necessary, at least 6 of them at least. We have cloned them in bacterial system and overexpressed them. The purpose of doing all this is to supplement these growth factors and see whether they can support the stem cells derived from these sheep muscles are able to maintain their division and differentiation. That would be a huge advantage, because anything that is produced in bacteria would cost you very little compared to what you do by either naturally isolating them or expressing it in another cell line. Fortunately, none of these growth factors require these post-translational modifications, so we are fine. That is not a problem at all. So the next one is scaffolds. I think all of us are, this is something, is a interesting challenge for non-biologists also a lot. So one of the very early decision one would like to make is, removable, degradable, or consumable scaffolds. One of the choices here. One can do 2D, two-dimensional cell cultures, which is not going to be very cost effective. If you go to 3-dimensional one, obviously the challenges are different. And before even that, we'll have to make sure whether you want some kind of a degradable scaffold or a scaffold that is consumable along with the cell lines that grow on them. See, these are the decisions one has to make. For each of these decisions, you will have different materials that need to be used. But if you look at the literature, there's plenty of choices, whether it's a plant or animal-based polymers or synthetic polymers, you name right from, all kinds of proteins like soya proteins, cluster bean proteins, jackfruit proteins, or the fungi, some kind of mushrooms, or animal, probably we don't go to animal-based ones, though some of them start talking about collagen and gelatin kind of polymers, hyaluronic acid and things like that. But we'll have to stay away from it. And if you really want to use them, there are ways to solve the problem by expressing these proteins also in bacteria so that you don't go to animals. So I think this particular are very overlapping with the fermentation vertical of the, the smart protein project itself, where fermentation means whether you talk about milk proteins or producing scaffolds, surfaces for scaffolds, like, various ECM binding proteins and things like that, or collagen. Can you produce collagen in bacteria and make it triple helix so that, the thing can behave like a natural one, or various peptide motifs that are there, which are known to be friendly to absorb cells to the scaffold surfaces. So there are plenty of choices, but there's a lot of opportunities today. The problems are not solved. And instead of looking for a generic polymers and scaffolds and surface derivatizations, one should be looking at solving a particular problem. Like, say, for example, I am working on sheep muscle cells, and we are so far we are doing it on a surfaces that are animal origin still, right? We have to come away from it because we are not able to grow them on plastic or glass. So we still use some collagen-based material to get our job done. Eventually, we have to wean ourselves off and then grow them on surfaces. We're also trying other things. So far, things didn't work, but different kind of expressing mimics of the ECMs in bacterial system and see whether they would help in better adherence of cells onto the scaffolds. So when you look at these scaffolds, the two-dimensional ones are kind of people are not very happy more because of their, even though mass transfers are pretty good, but the density per scaffold, the number of cells per scaffold will be very small. So there is a requirement for 3D scaffolds, where once you make it 3D, then the issues of porosity, mass transfer, adherence, because if it is a two-dimensional surface, probably your accessibility to the surface is excellent. So you would be able to do many things uniformly. But when you talk about 3D structures, the internal surfaces are not as accessible as the surfaces at the outside of the 3D scaffold. So the porosity becomes an issue. How many of the cells that they kind of penetrate into the pores of the 3D scaffold and populate the internal space. Because in a 3D thing, you get much larger square meter surface for a given weight of a material. So you would be able to get a lot of it. But at the same time, mass transfer becomes an issue. If the things are not solved properly, there will be a death, necrotic inside, and then, so that's not acceptable. And also, we are also looking at differentiation. Differentiation requires some kind of a stimuli, electrical or mechanical stimuli. So the 3D scaffolds should be responsive so that you are able to give a stimuli which is uniform throughout the scaffold and helps in releasing the cells from the surfaces, or cause the differentiation from myoblasts to myofibers or something like that. So these are all extremely interesting challenges, in my opinion. I think even if clean meat is not there in our horizon, these are the problems that they're lovely problems to solve. So that's why I feel excited by looking at them. Scale up is, I think it's a bigger challenge. I'm less informed about the challenges in scale up, but there are, one has to come up with media versus cell type versus scaffold optimization. So these are all something, once you have come up with these three components together, at least in the laboratory scale up requires a specific optimization at a scale up of 100 liters or 500 liters or whatever. So there are also a lot of economics in the process. Bioprocess comes up. Should we be looking at a 10,000 liter one or 10,000 liter fermenters? So there are a lot of, when you read the literature, people talk about it, and what are the tricks of the trade to reduce the contamination? Because in these things, you have to put it in the culture for maybe more than a week or so. So there are additional challenges, unlike bacterial fermentation. There are additional challenges in terms of how do you sterilize the system without wasting a lot of heat energy? How do you reduce the usage of antibiotics? So many things come into play, and each one is an excellent problem to solve on its own. So they all make a huge impact in the overall process of clean meat. So these are some of the problems that come to my mind. Overcoming proliferation without genetic modifications. There are several tricks. It's a matter of focusing a particular problem, how to get around that, because proliferation is one of the things that will probably decide the economics of the whole process. The one we talked about, cell banking solutions, which are mostly on the quality parameters, and also what kind of genetic drifts are happening during proliferation, and what are the criteria one should establish. Media components, of course, there are so many solutions one can come up with. And as I said about biomimicking scaffolds, scaffolds are physically, they are easy to get, but at the same time, how do you make them compatible for binding of the cells? You require several tricks. People use RGD peptides, people use different motifs. We are trying some kind of bacterially expressed ECM mimics and trying to solve the problems. I'm sorry for a typo there. Tricks in culturing, cell culturing, I mean. Like I said, how can you wean a cell into a situation where many of these expensive growth factors are not required? And the final one, which is my favorite, is also, one is solving the problem of biomass of the cell types, but how do you bring in the aroma and texture? Of course, texture comes from other cell types that are there in the natural meat, but how do you bring in the texture? Probably post-production is one. And aroma are that's a very important thing when you wanted to convince the consumers about the nearness of the cultivated meat to the natural meat is to come up with a kind of fingerprinting of aroma of natural meat, and then kind of substitute those components in this, so that the closeness of this cultured meat will be more to the natural meat. So in my opinion, this is a very wide scope, and there are several people need to come together, because it's not something like one lab or one institute can solve the problem, because different disciplines have to come together to solve the problem. So consortia versus individuals, so it has to be consortia approach. Individuals can probably solve a small problem, but it has to be looked at in the overall context. So I believe, in my opinion, this is an excellent opportunity to innovate. And people who are listening to this, I'm sure you appreciate they can plug into one of the several problems that are there here and solve it. And GFI kind of organizations would help you to network with other complementary agencies, so that the whole thing can quickly go forward, right? And I think I've kind of come to the last slide of my thing. And then, is it a problem? I think it's not a problem. If you put your head together, I mean, you're looking at almost like something impossible terrain to cross, but it's not a problem in my opinion. And thank you very much for your time. If there are any questions, and thank you GFI for giving me an opportunity to say what I said. It's a great support from GFI, and I wish GFI will become more and more effective in their objectives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sorry, thank you, Dr. Rao. I mean, for the wonderful presentation. And
thank you.
Yeah, we have a few questions trickling in the Q&A section. So, can we use neoplastic cancer cells for cell line development over normal cells? Would you like to answer that live?
Yeah, I think that's generally kind of a big no. It always gives a kind of a negative impression to the acceptance of the, I would not like to know when I'm eating a synthetic meat, it is something uncontrolled growth and something like cancer and things like that. And it's not necessary. Though neoplastic cells have their ability to grow without any issue, but we don't go there. But as I said, our cell banking challenges are primarily towards that end, where we wanted to avoid any of the, because neoplasticity is a genetic drift. But we wanted to look at issues where the genetic drift is not that leads to cancer per se, but some of the benefits of overcoming the proliferations and things like that, rather than using the cancer cells for clean meat. No.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Rao. Just to add to that, I think obviously you can use cancer cells to gain insights as to why they became cancerous, in terms of formulating your experiments or creating your own cell lines, which would be applicable towards developing cultivated meat products.
Sure.
Yes, yeah, just for the audience. Okay, there is one more question. How many different bona fide embryonic stem cell lines? Okay, I think the question is how many bona fide embryonic stem cell lines do we have of the species which people in India eat commonly?
I am not really, I don't know the answer, but I read only of one in the sense where the quality has been very well assessed, and culturing has been done. But in principle, probably everybody can talk about, they have isolated it, but, looking after how long they have been, they have been useful, how many generations have went up and all that, I have no information on that. So one can get back to you on that.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Rao. Just to add to this as well, I think this is one of the biggest bottlenecks of the industry right now, having bona fide stem cell lines of species which are consumed across chicken, mutton, a bunch of species, seafood cell lines, and that's one of the biggest problems, and that's the reason why we have an RFP around that, creating a cell bank or a cell line bank for researchers to be able to access these cell lines to do research, build technologies around cultivated meat research areas. Okay, one last quick question for you, Dr. Rao, and I think we can talk about embryonic stem cell lines specifically in terms of seafood, because the next speaker, Dr. Goswami, is an expert in. I mean, he has spent a lot of years building cell banks in seafood. But one last question is next generation sequencing. Say, for example, whole genome sequencing of cell lines is very useful in screening. Do you see this technology in use specifically in probably cultivated meat research? That's what the question meant, probably. This from Pratima.
Yeah, probably in a way to, in a very targeted way to look at whether how much is the, drifts in during proliferation and things like that. NGS will give you a quick readout of the entire genome, what kind of replacements or changes have taken place, say from one generation to 30th or 40th generation. So that'll be one way that'll be very useful to assess the quality of the cell line, which probably makes it much more a stronger argument for people to accept a cell line that has, did not drift too much over, tens of generations. I think NGS would be a good quality check, probably, when you want to use it, whenever quality comes into play.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Rao. Okay, I think these are some of the questions. I had a few clarifications from my own end,
Sure.
from some of the questions which participants asked previously, not during this session, but we could go towards that at the end of the second part of this webinar. So I now request Dr. Goswami to present his slides on cultivated seafood. Over to you, Dr. Goswami.
Thank you. The host who can share, start sharing this post, or which one I should click? There is an option is coming. Who can share? Only host, all panelists.
Devika, if you could do something about this.
Dr. Goswami, you're a co-host, so you should be able to share your screen. There is a share screen option below. Are you able to see it? Yes.
Yeah. You can see my slide?
We can see your screen, yes. You can switch to your slide.
Is it visible now?
Yes, yes, it is.
Okay, this is fine.
Yeah, if you could just go full screen, Dr. Goswami, would be helpful.
Okay, is it okay?
Yes.
Yeah, now it looks great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Devika.
Good evening to all of you. Thank you very much, Dr. Akshay, and then GFI India team. And thank you, Dr. Madhusudan Rao, and our audience. I don't know how many will be interested in hearing a cell line, but I enjoyed the lecture delivered by Dr. Madhusudan Rao. Maybe for the first time, I am going to deliver my lecture in this forum organized by GFI. So I would like to next, is it? Why it's not moving to the next? Yeah. I would like to talk about my organization, that is Indian Council of Agricultural Research.
Dr. Goswami?
Yes.
Sorry for interrupting. If you could just switch off your video because your voice is breaking a little.
Okay.
I'm not sure if it's only for me, but if you could just switch off your video and present, it would be nice.
Fine. Yeah. So now,
Yes, please continue.
yeah, Indian Council of Cultural Goods, the organization is one of the largest agricultural system in the world, with about 101 ICR institute and 71 agricultural universities. And then there are many divisions like animal science, agricultural science, crop science, and then natural resource management, agricultural engineering, horticultural science, and the fisheries science. So I belong to this fisheries science. And I'm working in the Central Institute of Fisheries Education. So ICR has 4 deemed universities. And among these, the Central Institute of Fisheries Education is dedicated towards the fisheries science in the country. And it has been playing important role in human resource development. And it's going to play the world-class organization in terms of research and education in fisheries science. So here we are offering fisheries science in 11 disciplines like aquaculture, fish genetics and biotechnology, fish nutrition and biochemistry and physiology, then fisheries harvest management, fishery resource management, here post-harvest management, then aquaculture, environment and health management, and then fisheries extension, economics and statistics. So these come under 6 divisions. So I am working in the division of fish genetics and biotechnology. Just I'm doing because I'm talking the first time in this platform. So I'm introducing myself. So presently I'm working as a principal scientist in genetics and biotechnology division in the ICR CIFE Mumbai. So before that I worked in different organizations. Then I completed many projects, and most of the projects are related to fish cell line development. And then recently we are about to complete one project, protein expression profiling of Leviorheta in collaboration with IIT Bombay. And then I'm very much thankful to GFI, Good Food Institute, for giving me the opportunity to work in, this is so-called the cellular aquaculture. So I'll be talking about what exactly is cellular aquaculture. And this will be within collaboration with the Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University, USA. So I'm very much thankful to GFI. And I'm very much thankful to GFI for giving me the opportunity to talk regarding the cellular aquaculture. So I have here again, I'm going to tell, I have a good student strength. Right now I have 6 PhD students and maybe 2 MSc students and project fellows. So now because of this, the GFI intervention, so I have diverted my research area, although I have been working in the line of development and characterization of cell lines. And mostly I'll be diverting most of my work towards this cellular aquaculture. If any students are interested, then they may be allowed to work in this area. So you can explore this opportunity. I'm getting difficulties going to the next slide. I don't know why. Yeah. So just I'm giving a brief outline of the Indian aquatic biodiversity. So we have a very strong aquatic biodiversity system in India, where we have around 3,035 fish species from different ecosystems, freshwater, brackish water, and marine water, having 500 exotic fishes, but they are mostly from ornamental fish. Then we have a very good marine resources, and then we have including the mollusks, crustaceans, and then seaweeds. And then fish in global scenario. So I'm giving one important aspect of this. The aquaculture, what is aquaculture is? The culture is in a controlled environment, not in open resource. And this aquaculture has been growing as one of the fastest food growing sectors in the world. It's providing 17% animal protein. And then maybe by feeding 9 billion people by 2050. So this aquaculture importance will be growing. If you see from here, how this aquaculture has been growing. If here 1995, so here it 86 from capture fisheries and hardly 14 from aquaculture. But if you see now, it is around 80 million tons is coming from aquaculture and 96 million is coming from capture fisheries. So then, as this aquaculture system, we are relying more and more on this aquaculture system. It has many challenges. So to replace those challenges, so we are coming with one concept. And GFI has been supporting to grow this, that is called cellular agriculture. And then cellular agriculture in fish, we are calling it as cellular aquaculture. So before coming to this cellular aquaculture, I have been developing and practicing cell lines for various applications. So although I have developed cell line from mussel also earlier, but I didn't know much about this application of these cell lines in cellular aquaculture, means cultivating meat in the lab. That started when I approached Professor Mark Post, who is the father of cultivated meat. And he suggested me to be in touch with GFI. So accordingly, I developed communication with GFI, and GFI, I participated their grand competition for the project. And then I successfully got what was doing. So we are going to address those challenges in the coming years. If we develop a cell line from other than the muscle tissues, we have been developing this cell line and characterizing and applying those cell lines. If you see here a wide range of tissue samples, and then we characterize those cell lines. If you see from its Leviorohida, and then there are different fish. They are aquaculture important, and then some are ornamental fish, and then some are even crustaceans. So we developed maybe more than 20 fish cell lines other than muscle tissue. But muscle tissue also, we have developed 2 cell lines. And recently one of my master's students has taken up this work. So as you are growing these muscle cells for developing a cell line, and is growing these muscle cell lines for the cultivation of and then producing lab meat is totally different. Going to face more and more challenges I'm going to discuss separately. But here difficulties are there, these two. Actually, this is from zebrafish first one. And then second one, another freshwater fish. We developed this muscle cell culture system and then stabilize those cells. And then we did both characteristics. But one difficulty we face that time due to the slow growth of these muscle cells. And to propagate, to enhance this growth, so you need to have some growth factor. Again, using this growth factor, but when we're talking about the cultivated meat, so that is the biggest challenge we are going to face. So for that also, how we need to work. So I'll be discussing. So here again, it is from Anders Hilarious Magur. So this, we haven't published this. This is recently completed this master's dissertation. here also, again and again, when you are developing muscle cells, so we need to prioritize from exactly which part of the fish, whether it is from dorsal fin, whether it is from caudal fin, whether it is from any part of that, where we'll be getting the best muscle cells. Now we'll be thinking this towards the cultivated meat. So we did characterization of this muscle, even for muscle cell culture also, if you are going to characterize. So first we need to do the characterization of species authentication, because I'll be talking for that, what will be the first criteria. The species authentication is very, very important. So here again, actually I work in the global campaign of DNA barcoding, and we are the first group use this DNA barcoding for authentication of fish. But that time we received some consignment or support to authenticate some important seafood, and then we use this DNA barcoding to authenticate the important seafood. But now this DNA barcoding is going to play important role in cultivated seafood also, because if you are asking for a fish, like you may be knowing the pomfret is very much costly. Again, if you are going for a very low value fish, so sometimes you can be cheated by that. So that for to the seafood leveling, to avoid or maybe some other kind of cheating. So this will be very, very important. Then here, this one also in the muscle cell culture we developed from the freshwater. We also use this immunocytochemistry technique to exactly identify the which type of cells is there. So in the muscle cell culture, again, this is going to play a very, very important role, because when we are culturing the muscle cells, and then differentiation is going to play important role to reach the ideal cells for cultivated seafood production. So in that scenario also, we need to identify the different types of cells at different differentiation stages. So starting from your myosatellites or maybe MPCs, and then different differentiation stages. Based on these markers, we need to identify the ideal muscle cells. Then we use these cell lines for virological studies also. Recently, this was from our MSc student published in a scientific reports. So means what? So we have been using this cell lines for various applications, and then we develop one cell line repository for only fish. This is only exclusively for fish. So before this, NCCS, National Center for Cell Science, Pune, used to develop and maintain the cell line repository. They used to maintain cell line. They are getting it from ATCC. But recognizing my work, Department of Biotechnology, Government of India has given me the responsibility to establish an one national repository where only fish cell lines have been maintained. So how this cell bank is going to play important role? So I'm not going, already Dr. Madhusudan Rao also has pointed out. So once we have this cell line, so we need to have this cell line in the repository. We need to have the cell line in the public domain, and those cell lines will be well characterized so that they will be ready to use. So if you are going to talk about this cultivated seafood, so we need to maintain the biobank of the muscle cell lines developed so far in the world, which are very few. So I'll be giving about the review of that, how many muscle cell lines we have. So again, this bank will be going to give one momentum to this cultivated seafood. So this is a National Repository of Fish Cell Line. But that time I was in another institute, National Bureau of Fish Genetic Resources. But presently I am in Central Institute of Fisheries Education. Now I'll be concentrating on the maintaining a biobank for muscle cell lines. So it will be dedicated only for muscle cell lines. Different types of muscle cells in this bank will be maintained. And this will be again useful for facilitating in vitro meat or seafood, cultivated seafood meat in the country. Or maybe while I did establish this repository, I received many requests from international agencies, there are many countries like Germany, some German research group, then Canadian group, then Australia, USA. So I think once we'll develop this biobank for muscle cell line, so we will have more importance. Say cellular aquaculture, what exactly it is? So as it is aquaculture, we control environment, we are producing fish. So here we'll be producing fish from a cell culture. Then what are those prospects and challenges? See, if you see the historical background, how interesting it is. In 2003, the NASA supported research program for edible muscle protein production from fish for space travelers. So now GFI has been giving so much emphasis on this, which started maybe 10, 15 years back, and maybe more than that. So how it is going to play important role? So what are those key challenges? So when you are talking about the 17% element protein is coming from fish, and then coming days it will be more and more. And then you know that capture fisheries production is going down and down, declination is there. So aquaculture is playing important role. Because of this intensification of aquaculture system, so it has many problems. So what will be the next alternative? That is your climate resilient production system. So what is your climate resilient production system? That is your cultivated seafood. So cultivated seafood, the driving point is the sustainability point. And this is going to be a game-changing food production system in the world. But what is the critical requirement for this? So critical requirement is, so we are giving importance to the development and characterization of muscle cells. So earlier we developed this muscle cell line just for maintaining as a cell line. But now whatever muscle cell line work will be there, that will be towards development of cultivated fish meat, cultivated seafood meat. So if you see in other system, other than fish, there are well-established model is there to study those myogenesis or adipogenesis. But here we don't have permanent muscle cell line system. Maybe if you see from snakehead and this, and then the blue line you can see from my lab. So we don't have many muscle cell lines. Again, those muscle cell lines have been developed to use for cultivated meat production. So now our focus is going to be changed. So we'll be using for cultivated seafood production. What are the most important requirements? The cell source. So we need to identify which muscle cells will be the best, whether then starting from your MPC, reaching up to myofibers, thinking how this differentiation will take place, how we are going to produce large scale of those cells, which will be good for cultivated seafood production. Then another system is scaffolding. Already Dr. Rao has explained about that. Scaffolding also, what kind of scaffolding? Because in this collaborative project, we are also trying to develop, we'll be trying to develop one protein-based, a plant-based scaffolding, because those scaffolding again will be consumable. So that should be taking into consideration that culture media and growth factors. These are also going to play important role. That the food grade reagents we are going to use, then your cost effectiveness and the bioreactor design. So these are very, very important for cultivated seafood production. So I'm skipping this. This is general how to make this one. And then another important, once we'll be doing this, is the organ printing. So here also from the marine resources are going to play very important role in developing this bioink, which will be required for 3D bioprinting. So what are the advantages of fish cell culture? So only just we are going for cellular aquaculture as an alternative to our conventional aquaculture industry, or we are having some merits over other land-based animals. So if you see the cells, there are many advantages over land-based land-based animal cells. The first important is the tolerance to hypoxia. So even in a low oxygen requirement, cells will be surviving. The cells will not be under stress. So they will be giving a good growth. High buffering capacity. So wide range of pH condition also you can grow cells. Maintain wide range of temperature. If you see mammalians, all those are 37. But here, whatever cell lines I developed in my laboratory, starting from cold water fish to warm water fish. So with a wide range of temperature, the cells can be maintained. The favorable growth at low temperature, which is very important for your bioreactor design. There are a cost of production. And then crustacean tissue friendly scaffolding. Again, that chitosense, what we are getting from your crustaceans, is also going to play an important role for making scaffolds. Then minimal maintenance. Maintenance is minimum. But so what is next? So what we need to, what will be the need of the world to propagate this cellular aquaculture? The first important point is selection of species. So which fish species we are going to select? Because we can't select each and every fish species, because we are going to cultivated seafood meat, mostly will be concentrating on whole cut meat. So we need to think about some fish species from where you can like your surimi, like Leviorowita from freshwater fish. So we can select some fish, then that will be your market driven. So how, Dr. Bhatt, if time is a constraint, is it, can I speak? It's, I think 7.
No worries, no worries, Dr. Goswami. You can go ahead for like next 5-10 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. Because this is very, very critical. Because only developing cell line, no, we need to focus. We will be, because it's a very laborious process. So many challenges will be there. So we need to focus on that right kind of species and the right kind of cell types. So because this, the understanding of in vitro myogenesis and adipogenesis, differentiation, then co-culture. So here I have gone through one publication where zebrafish is the best model to start cellular aquaculture. Why it is so? Because it's a lean fish. But when we are going for some fatty fish, but again, there is a problem if you are only developing muscle fibers. So that, as I'm pointing out here, is a culinary effect which you are going to have. So it should mimic the taste and flavor of the original fish. So we need to the blend of adipocytes, myocytes. But again, there are many challenges when we are going to develop this culture and utilizing the bioreactor. There are many challenges and many problems will be there. So our next focus should be there also how to get into this both type of cells, and then how to design the bioreactor and then scaffolding, so that we can develop mass scale production, not only a mass cell, but those cells will be close to the flavor and taste of the original fish species. Then optimization of serum, that's of course, because my collaborator, he has got 10 million grant from USDA, and he is working on the media optimization. So which is going to play a very important role. Which medium will be good for this cellular aquaculture from cost point of view, and then serum what will be using, then food grade reagents, because whatever you will be developing, that will go to the consumer. So we need to see this very seriously. And then there are molecular aspects. I am also planning, because here in the hyperplasia and hypertrophy both have been observed in fish muscle cells, maybe some CRISPR technique where the myostatin gene is a negative regulator for the muscle cells, hyperplasia and hypertrophy. So that kind of intervention, gene editing technique is also going to play a very important role. And then what is most important is the networking and collaboration. So if you say, okay, from fish cell culture point of view, I can do this work, muscle cells, but there are chemistry, there are optimization of food grade medians, molecular mechanisms, there are myogenesis, adipogenesis. There are many things are going to play important role when we are going to produce the cultivated seafood. So the integration, then networking, like in maybe some institute like CCMB, Dr. Rao is working, then maybe ICT, Mumbai, IIT Bombay, IIT Madras. Last time also I attended one webinar, Dr. Srivastava from IIT Madras. So like that, we need to develop a strong network, strong interdisciplinary scientists should come together so that if you do that way, then it will be speed up. Otherwise, it will be delayed. So our work will be delayed because here our point is it's exactly what going to close to the original taste and flavor of the fish species. Other people will not accept it. Cost is okay. Cost again, that is a challenging, that is different. But other than cost, if it is not matching with the taste and flavor, so this is not going to work. So that is very, very important. Then some private partners are coming up. In India also clear meat has come up, but they haven't started the fish. But other than this, the Blue Nalo or Finlays or maybe the Singapore base, they are coming with some kind of seafood. But I don't think that they have come to the market. It will take time. And maybe see here also, there are many partners, many startup partners are coming up to take up this work. So this is going to be, this will be very, very challenging at the same time. So finding these things in interdisciplinary team networking, and then like GFI is, I'm very much thankful to GFI. So GFI has been supporting a lot, and this is a novel concept of producing meat, taking into consideration of environment. There's a climate resilient food production system. So this was published, I've seen in the Nature, what they're telling, the academic research can play a significant and lasting role in accelerating the path to market. So here again, not only producing cultivated seafood, to laboratory, it's to come to the laboratory and reach market that people accept it. But to reach to the market, we need to do so many things and so many challenges are there. But when we'll be working in integration, when we'll be working in a very big networking mode, and then the institute like GFI will be there, I think this will not be, I mean, that to get this cultivated seafood meat in India, so you need not to wait for long. Thank you so much. And then I'd like to acknowledge my mentor, Professor W.S. Lakra. Actually, I started my cell culture work with him. That time we have a project with NCCS Pune, then worked simultaneously NBSGR and ICR. Then DBT has been supporting a lot. And now the GFI USA and GFI India for the new project. And then my students are my strength. And maybe I'll be willing to take more students as maybe postdoc fellows or maybe PhD or maybe some short-term thesis work. And thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Goswami, for the wonderful presentation. Your voice was breaking a bit in between, but I think I got the gist of what you're presenting. Hopefully, our audience were also able to get what you're speaking about, but just fine. No worries about that. So we could probably get into some questions. We have a question again from Pratima. The question is, for gene expression profiling of fish, do you see microarrays or RNA sequencing transcriptomics being used in cellular agriculture? I think you have been working with a collaborator who is specifically focused on proteomics, right? So I don't know whether you can throw some light on this specific question.
It's a very good question. So whole genomics for this particular fish, Leviroeta, already has been completed. And proteomics in collaboration with IIT Bombay we have developed a peptide atlas and web-based proteome map. So we identify from all the important tissue samples. So transcriptome profiles are available. Yeah, all those transcriptome, genomes, and the proteome profile will be there. So it will be good for understanding the biology of this, because in muscle cell culture also we need to understand many things. So it will be quite useful.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Goswami. And just to add to what Dr. Goswami just said, I think whatever applies for some of the other land animals in terms of, let's say, chicken or mutton or beef, whichever of these cell lines people are working currently for generating cultivated meat, the same applies for cultivated seafood as well. Obviously, applying some state-of-the-art techniques such as building microarrays, or probably even doing RNA sequencing or whole genome sequencing for fish species relevant to seafood would be definitely more valuable in terms of the data it will generate, in terms of the insights it will give for creating these cell lines. So yeah, and if participants have an idea around that, please don't hesitate to put forth your proposals in that angle as well. Yeah, but in the meantime, I also encourage participants to come up with more questions. If you want to ask a question, please raise your hand and we can unmute you for you to ask a question live to Dr. Goswami. Dr. Madhusudan Rao unfortunately had to drop off because he had some other professional commitments. But Dr. Goswami, either Dr. Goswami or I can take any questions which you have. Please type them in the Q&A box or ask them live by raising your hand. But I mean, I have a few questions for you on Dr. Goswami. I mean, in terms of, let's say, cultivated seafood and cultivated, let's say, other, for example, cultivated chicken or cultivated beef, for example, I think the importance of co-cultures could be very important. But in terms of the fat content of, let's say, cultivated seafood versus the fat content of, let's say, cultivated beef or cultivated mutton, I think that's a lot of variation in terms of the percentage of fat and the quality of fat, the type of fat which is present in either of these species, are very wide and far away, if I'm not wrong. But what do you think about having or building co-cultures? Would be really valuable, and do you think that is something which can be pulled off right at the start? For example, you're doing or cultivating or culturing muscle cells, but at the same time, would you be able to culture, let's say, adipocytes as well? Have you ever thought of that, or what's your take on that?
Yeah, thank you, Akshay. Actually, in our project, so we are going to work out this, because see, if you are, but in some fish, like lean fish or cyprinids, like a zebrafish comes under also cyprinids, and levirota comes under also this cyprinids group. So your fat percentage is very low, but still to have the taste of that cultivated seafood, cultivated fish meat, so we need to go for co-culture of this myogenic cells, myocytes, as well as adipocytes. But there are challenges I have seen, gone through some literature. When it will be going for large scale production, the co-culture in the bioreactor, so that has to be, that issue has to be, again, we need to tackle it. That's what, okay, here we may be successful, we'll be definitely successful here, but in case of bioreactor mass scale production, that will be again a challenges aspect. But this will be very important, because without this adipocytes, if you're only developing muscle cells, so then you will not be matching the taste and flavor of the original fish. But there are some fish like tuna, and then some there are high fat content. So again, the co-culture will be very, very important.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Goswami. So we have one more question. So this is from Yadidya, but before I ask that question, Yadidya, we have a dedicated session for cell culture media optimization, which is going to happen the next week, Tuesday. So please participate in that webinar for your specific questions on how do you basically optimize media, what are the components, what could be different combinations of factors which could be used, proteins and growth factors, for example, what are the different alternative methods of production of these growth factors, alternatives from plants, or let's say even other microorganisms could be used or could be tried out to create those formulations for cultivated meat cell culture or cell culture media, basically. But yeah, I mean, but Dr. Goswami, I'm not sure whether you can specifically add more insights here in terms of. So the question is, please give your insights about media optimization methods.
Yeah.
Would you like to answer that?
Yeah, I can based on my experience. So while I have been developing cell lines from different fish species and different tissue samples from a particular fish, even if you have different tissue samples, the cells are growing in a different way. So it's very difficult to grow them in an artificial atmosphere. Then this media optimization is going to play a very important role, because only medium it will not work. Along with medium, you need to use serum, you need to use growth factors. And then when you are putting them in the incubator, taking into the growth studies, taking into consideration of temperature, then your other factors. So there are some medium will be there. You can use directly BUD incubator, like L15 you are using. The CUT incubator is not at all required, but other medium you will be using, that the CO2 incubators will be required. And then if you are suppose getting good slow growth in case of muscle cells, so you are using growth factors, cells will be growing fast, but again cost will be a problem. So that's why this media optimization is very, very important. Maybe we have developed muscle cell lines using L15's media, it is growing well. But again, this media optimization will be required, not only proliferations. You may be getting good growth of cells, and then differentiation is also very, very important, because when differentiation is because of cultivated seafood production, the differentiation stage reaching to ideal cells, ideal myocytes is also very, very important. So that media optimization will give you how much myocytes or ideal cells you are going to get, and then you are moving to the next. That in the bioreactor phase also, the media optimization will be extremely important. And this is also playing to important role. Again, you are putting some value-added or maybe food grade reagents you are using. So it is going to play like you are in a, suppose fuel is important. When you are in a car, you are driving a car, fuel is very important. So producing this seafood, cultivated seafood, this media optimization is going to be very important. Not only the biology, technique, the cost also, it is going to play important role. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Goswami. I think we have a few questions on specifically culture media optimization. Probably the reason being that most of these, let's say, different areas are very much intertwined, right? So one thing cannot happen without the other one. So I think everything is ultimately let's say very interdisciplinary, and that's the reason why we have these questions coming in. But thanks for that question, Adivya, and probably we'll have more insights in our session, like I said before, on culture media optimization. We also have one more question which has come in here. Do you see probiotics in aquaculture is in use in India context already, or a niche market in exclusion phase? This is from Pratima. Sorry, I don't understand the question, Pratima. So if you'd like to come live and ask the question, we could unmute you. So Pratima, would you like to ask the question live here in the session?
You can unmute yourself, Pratima.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hello, sir. I'm a little curious on the probiotic side. So we see that, probiotics, lot many researchers happening on the probiotic side for human and other areas. And I've also heard about use of probiotics in aquaculture. Basically, it could be either in terms of fish or, some kind of probiotics for fish, or it could be in improving the water quality, which indirectly, has influence on the fish. So do you see probiotics, being in use in, aquaculture in the Indian context? I mean, we see that in the plant context, but do you see that in use already in aquaculture context?
Yeah. The probiotics has been used in aquaculture. The probiotic has many applications in addition to this water quality improvement. So you met their growth, fish growth. There are many important roles are there, and but this is not it in a very common, because this is an intensive aquaculture system only, it has been used. But traditional way or maybe semi-intensive level, people are not using this much. But this is see, again, this probiotics, I'm just throwing some light on how this intestinal cell lines can be useful to study those aspects. There are some cell line, intestinal cell lines have been developed from rainbow trout or maybe some other fish. And then where maybe the gut model also has been developed to see that how this nutrient assimilation, absorption, all those things happen. So this is going to play a very important role. So that study can be taken out using this fish cell line also. We can see that probiotics, but it has been used in aquaculture.
Yeah, just one more thing I would like to add here is, say, for example, if we have the sample, we can make use of NGS technology to understand what kind of microorganisms are already there in the water, or what kind of beneficial organisms we can come up with, and even probiotics specific to the species can be actually designed and could be used so that the aquaculture product remains at a high par. So that's why I think probiotics is being experimented in various sectors. So just wanted to check with you in the aquaculture sector. Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Pratima. Just tying that up into what all about cultivated seafood. I think the role of probiotics, obviously, in terms of cultivated seafood, is not seen right now at this point in time. I think people are just focusing on developing that critical technology as to how cells can be cultured and taken that to scale. But obviously, that could be a value addition in terms of the quality of meat produced through cultivated seafood, probably sometime down the line. But thanks for the question. So we are almost at time. We have 3 minutes to go. So yeah, I think this has been answered. But I think there was one more question about can waste from extracted protein-rich crops, which is basically used in plant-based meat, can be used to create scaffolds, and any thoughts on such novel scaffolds. But I can answer this question myself. So obviously the extractions from protein-rich crops could definitely be used in terms of creating scaffolds. There are a number of substrates which can be experimented with. For example, substrates with protein could include probably soybean oil cake, pumpkin oil cake, a bunch of oil cakes basically, which could be definitely used in terms of creating scaffolds. But at the same time, I think when one is creating scaffolds, I think they should also keep in mind in terms of how will your scaffold be compatible with the cell line you're working with, how they actually get into the scaffold and become a part of the scaffold, or would you remove the scaffold at a later point in time and use it only for culturing, let's say 3D, for example, 3D culture of cells, variety of cells, for example, to create a meat-like structure. And also in terms of organoleptic properties, in terms of food safety, is it food grade? So I think there are multiple factors which need to be considered, but obviously that's something which can definitely be explored, and there are a lot of research, I should say a few research groups focusing on creating such kind of scaffolds across the world. Yeah, but I think we are almost at time. It's 7:30 p.m. But I would like to thank Dr. Mukunda Goswami for giving his time and for the wonderful set of slides which he presented to the audience. And I hope the audience or the participants derived in very key or important insights from both of these sessions, the one from Dr. Madhusudan Rao and the second one from Dr. Mukunda Goswami. But just to let all the participants know, Dr. Mukunda Goswami as well as Dr. Madhusudan Rao would be available as mentors for phase 3 and phase 4, and for all the qualified teams who move into phase 3 and would be looking for mentors. If you have compatibility in terms of the proposal as well as what work and expertise both of these mentors have, please feel free to reach out to us first, and we'll help you connect with either Dr. Goswami or Dr. Rao. But once again, thank you everyone for participating in the third ISPIC inspirational webinar, and stay tuned for more. We have one coming up tomorrow evening as well on the applications of fungi. in the space of smart proteins. So stay tuned for that, and hope to meet all of you in tomorrow's session.